I'm looking more at option number 2, which is the independent board structure. And my question really came down to, there was a con that was in here talking about EUB being solely responsible for more administrative functions and making the cost of running the electric utility more expensive. We're already paying a percentage of revenues now, as it currently stands, correct, Mark, to fund those administrative functions within city government that manage bill collection and other, you know, the billing systems and those kind of things. Is that correct? Would you be able to speak on that?
Correct. Right now, the GE provides a franchise fee and also pays through interdepartment transfers for HR, billing, accounting, various services, IT. I don't have the exact number, but I want to say around $468,000 every year.
It's something like 5%.
No, 5% is the franchise fee.
That's for 5, but there's an additional
3%?
3%. I think it's a
No, I think it's more of a cost of county. I don't think it's a percentage.
Basically,
chargeback.
It's a flat amount? Oh.
basically, there's a number determined by finance, city admin. I don't know how that number's actually calculated, and it comes across into our budget. We pay it for a service. To me, that's actually a benefit to the entire city, because if
Helps defray the cost of the infrastructure that we currently maintain.
correct, personally, as just a citizen paying a bill, you already have a water and wastewater bill going out. So does it take that?
You have one utility bill.
Correct. But if you had a water, wastewater billing, and then you also had an electric billing, you'd be duplicating efforts.
Correct.
I don't see why you'd ever do that. So it makes sense that the right hand would pay the left hand, no matter what the format is. So even if it's an independent board, I don't see why you wouldn't, instead of an interdepartment transfer, you would have an invoice if you have to, if it's a completely separate legal entity. But if it's not, it's still a department transfer.
That's correct. However, and I want to follow up with this here, budgetary authority, and this is where the rubber meets the road here. Ultimately, as we know, if it's under the jurisdiction of the city, if it's not a totally independent utility board, that we would still be responsible for the budget. We still have to sign on the bottom line on numbers that, you know, would be set by who?
Well, that would be found in the ordinance at the end of the day. It goes back to my legal side.
Correct, and right now, it's unclear. I mean, it really is, because it says you have responsibility for it, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, well, it says one thing in the ordinance, but in practice, we still have to manage that budget.
At the end of the day, it's a city department, so it ultimately ends up in
Our
city
hands.
council's hands.
Exactly.
Simple as that.
And-
So the only real difference is that there's more input and dealings with the numbers into that spreadsheet. That's the biggest difference.
And decisions made from the standpoint of, you know, day-to-day operations are not, and again, that's just like any other agency. I mean, we don't make decisions on behalf of water and wastewater. We don't make decisions on behalf of Jeff and Parks and Rec. That's you know, they manage those independently of our decisions here, unless it's a very large, you know, policy decision.
So, Steve, what is the benefit in your mind of moving toward an independent board versus an advisory board? What's the difference?
We keep the institutional knowledge that we've acquired, and we are able to move more quickly, I think, with the expertise of an appointed board, and I would like to keep it appointed, obviously.
No, I'm talking, okay, so you said that, you prefer number 2 over number 3, that
Yes, I
you're
do.
not in favor of an advisory board. So I'm trying to understand what you think number 2 gives you that number 3 doesn't.
Well, I think that Chris actually makes a very good point here. It continues to operate as a business model. The business model itself is one of more of a nonprofit than of a city agency, and that's what I like. I like that functionality there. It allows them to be able to make decisions that are business-based rather than, you know, I would say the word politics, but that's what, you know,
So can we,
it comes back to.
I keep hearing this, run it like a business, and I guess, when I think of running something like a business is for profit, right?
Well, it
Obviously.
doesn't have to be, it could be a not-for-profit.
A not-for-profit, okay, so
But it's
is
a separate
your-
entity.
Yeah, is your thought that this, I mean, I guess, run it like a business means what? Because in my opinion, we should want to run all government entities as efficient
I would
as
love
a
to.
business, but set aside the profit side. So what does run it like a business mean? And I guess I'm still going back to, I can't differentiate between number 2 and 3, what we would get as a difference.
Yeah,
Other than we have no control in number 2. I mean, we basically set it aside.
Personally, I can address that.
Okay.
First, I would like to note that 2 and 3, according to Mr. Freeman, are kind of where we're wavering anyway, and really, either one is going to have gotchas or nuances, right? So you could have an independent board that says, you don't get to do this, this, and this, right? You advise on those issues. Whatever those issues are can be dictated at another point. But the advantage that I see as an independent board is certain decisions then, one, can be done faster. They don't have to come to council and go back and forth, potentially. 2, you don't have that political aspect. That's kind of what I pulled out of the BPU investigation committee. So in the EUB meetings, they're strictly focused on EUB matters. So it doesn't matter if the city budget is looking poorly, if a light pole is down, it's getting fixed, right? We got to care about that piece. In the grand scheme of things, you have to work with the city. You can't be one hand doing completely, off on their own. But we can have that institutional knowledge in practice, not just have knowledge that gets thrown over a wall and hope that everybody takes that to heart.
And Mark, the BPU study committee that you referenced, we had 10 members on that.
Yeah.
And actually, after studying that for 5 months, thereabouts, more than a handful of meetings,
Oh, sure.
a lot of brain power in the room,
Oh, yeah.
and engineers, an EUB board member, and the former chairman, still EUB board member, Lance Boyd, who's a executive with KMEA. But the unanimous decision that came back was to recommend to council to look at establishing a BPU, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just,
But that was your goal, was to have established a BPU.
Well,
you know what, I didn't, I mean,
I could-
I didn't
that-
twist anybody. Christie was there, Mark was there, it was a
But I
free
also-
flow of information.
I also think establishing a BPU is, we can choose an option today and still
Work on the
long-term
BPU.
say we want
Exactly.
to do
Right.
something. That could include looking at selling, I mean, to me, there's a lot of options that we can look at, but we're not going to do that. I mean, we're not going to establish a BPU tonight. We're not going
Well-
to direct staff to go back and say, bring us back an
Actually-
ordinance next month that establishes a BPU.
And that wasn't my intention. My intention is, I would like to see one idea of what the long-term result is, but if we're coming back with something that's a long-term result, then we need to look at what the short-term result needs to be. And actually, at this point, it looks like the short-term result is number 3, but the long-term result, I think, Steve and you and Tori anyway, and if it had to be established by a charter ordinance, which would require everybody on the governing body to vote 2/3, so that means I would vote, that's 4. I think the long-term goal for a supermajority of the governing body is move towards the BPU, but we do have to, and I'm not even saying that it has to be independent or advisory at this point. I'm saying that if we want to have stable rates across all 3 utilities, if we want our residents to get their bills and be able to budget their own